Okay, a couple of weeks ago I told a story about pastoring a church in North Carolina, Marvin United Methodist Church, how large this drafty old church was, and in the winter the heating system was a hot water boiler, and it would be weird that I would go down the hallways in the winter to set things up late at night for the service the next morning, and it sounded like I was being followed down the hallway by the hot water heater pipes popping and banging and clanging as I would make my way down the hall into the sanctuary. It sounded like I was being followed by some unseen, powerful spiritual forces. It could be terrifying. And I said that at night, late at night, in a great big drafty sanctuary, a church can be a frightening place. One of the reasons why it can be frightening is, especially if it's an old wooden structure and a pier and beam structure, you walk along, you hear the floorboards creak, and you hear the hot water clanging and banging. The scary thing is not only do you hear that hot water clanging and banging, but you could also hear the floorboards creaking when nobody's walking there. Terrifying experience. Well, about 10 years later, I was pastor at First Methodist Church in Seagoville, and while I was there, the church was blessed to receive an orphan. A beautiful, sweet, black and white cat named Lily. We named her the Lily of the office. And she was the darling child of the congregation. Everybody brought treats to her. Everybody took care of her. Peggy, the secretary, took care of her in the office. She had a little kitty cat door. She could go in and out of the office by herself. And her job, and yes, she had a job. She was actually on the church's roster with a job. She was pest control expert. Her job was to go after the mice and go after the bugs and take care of getting rid of those pests. I understand that Gene, the skunk, has been spotted, by the way, and so we should have a church cat to take care of the skunk. Yeah, right. Anyway, Lily was a fabulous mouser. She could take care of bugs, but she was also a great companion to me. I'd be up at the church late at night, working on things, getting ready, going into the sanctuary to set things up. One of my jobs, one of the things that I did every week was I'd go in on Monday to the back of the sanctuary into the closet where we had the controls for the digital sign, and I would type in all the information for the next week on it. And Lily would go with me. It was time to go take care of the digital sign. I'd go, "Come on, Lily," and she'd leap out off her chair, come running out into the hallway, and follow me down the hall, finally get ahead of me. You know how cats can be, prissing away, tail up in the air, leading the way in the processional through the fellowship hall, into the sanctuary, all the way to the back of the sanctuary where the controls were for the digital sign. She would lead the way, she'd walk around, she'd meow at me, I'd meow back. We'd have a nice conversation on the way there and a nice conversation on the way back. In fact, I said that Kat was on the staff of the church. No, we were her staff. As you know, dogs have masters or owners, cats have staff. And that's exactly what we were to Lily, the Lily of the office. She was a sweet, dear cat who kept me company. Even in the quiet, dark, and scary, spooky times in that building late at night, Lily would keep me company. Purring, sitting on my stomach, meowing at me, following me around, leading the way. She was always there to remind me that I was not alone. And she did her job, and she did it well. She took care of the mice. She took care of the rats. She took care of the bugs. She was a good church cat. I thanked God for Lily. I thanked God that Lily was there. And when I went to my next church, St. Stephen, I was at a loss. There was no church cat. And of course, I suggested to the trustees when we had a pest problem, maybe we should get a church cat. Guess what the answer was? No. Lily was clean. She took care of herself. She was a good cat. But they didn't buy it. In fact, it was a sad day when I had to leave. Lily was a good cat. I thanked God for the Lily of the office, the sweet and loving cat. Why do we thank God? Why do we give thanks? Why do we offer prayers of praise and thanksgiving to God? Why do we store up for ourselves treasures in heaven? We've been talking about that. Why do we go about doing that? Why do we give thanks? Why do we give thanks and praise? Why do we celebrate and thank God for all the gifts that we've been given? Why do we do it? Some people say we do it to get to heaven. I've had people tell me the purpose of the religious life, the purpose of having faith is so that you can go to heaven, right? Well, there's a part of it that has to do with going to heaven. I mean, that's important. But what's more important is the journey itself. Yes, the destination is important, but Jesus has already taken care of that. Jesus has already died for us, that we don't have to fear sin and we don't have to fear death. Jesus has already taken care of it. I go and prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you unto myself, so that where I am, there you will be also. He's already gone to take care of heaven for us. He's already died to take care of heaven for us. Heaven's already done. We trust in God. We love God. Heaven's taken care of. The journey here is where our focus is. Our life of faith with God. How we love God and how we love neighbor. Jesus said, "This is my commandment, that you love one another." When Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he said, "Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself." The journey here toward heaven is our focus as religious people. How we treat others. How we work for justice and righteousness. Two sides of the same coin. Without justice, you cannot have righteousness. Without righteousness, you cannot have justice. And the whole concept there is balance. Living your life in balance with God's love. Treating others as we would be treated. That's justice and righteousness, friends. In other words, it's the journey. The journey in this life. Not just about going to heaven, but how we live our life in the here and in the now. In the moment and in the day. Going to heaven is important, but there's a whole lot more to our life of faith than just going to heaven. Going to heaven is God's job, and God's done it. God's taking care of it in Jesus. What's our job? What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do in living by faith? Our job is to live by faith. Our job is to love God. Our job is to love neighbor as self. Our job is to trust Jesus. Our duty and responsibility, the expectation that God has for us, as we will love God and love neighbor as self. We will treat others as the beautiful children of God that they are, that we will work for righteousness and justice in the land. We're called to give. Now, last week we talked about the how we are to give thanks. And I suggested to you that it's even in the midst of the trials and tribulations of this life, when things go awry, when the rust comes and the moth eats, and when the hurricane blows, in those moments we are called to give thanks to God. Not for the rust and the moth and the hurricane, but to give thanks to God anyway. That we are in God's presence, that we have the joy of praying, and that we are called to rejoice in God's love. Today we're going to ask the question, why? Why do we give thanks? Why do we go about this process of worship? Why do we go about the process of prayer? Why do we study Scripture? Why do we engage in the Christian life? Why do we work for justice and righteousness in the land? Why do we do this Christian thing called church? Why do we worship God? Why do we offer prayers of praise and thanksgiving? Why do we give? That's the question today. And the answer is nicely laid out for us in Psalm 107. where the psalmist writes, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His steadfast love endures forever." And you know what? That's the answer. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His steadfast love endures forever. It goes on and gives this parallelation of events. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, those who he redeemed from trouble. He gathered from the lands, from the east, the west, the north, the south. Some wandered in desert wastes, finding no way in an inhabited town. Hungry and thirsty, their soul fainted within them. Keeps going, speaking about those who were sick in their sinful ways, and they loathed any kind of food, and they drew near to the gates of death. And in all these cases, they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and He saved them from their distress. He sent out His word and healed them and delivered them from destruction. And then in all cases, it says, let them thank the Lord for His steadfast love, for His wonderful works to humankind, and let them offer thanksgiving sacrifices and tell of His deeds with songs of joy. Why are we called to do this Christian thing called worship? Why are we called to do this church stuff? Why are we called to be Christians? Why are we called to live a life of faith? Why are we called to do this thing called the Christian life? Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His steadfast love endures forever. It's because of His steadfast love. It's because of His steadfast love. Now, let's take a look at that. His steadfast love endures forever. Steadfast, never ending, always hanging on, tenacious, never going away, never failing, steadfast, unmovable, unshakable, undestroyable. His steadfast love, the love that does not move, does not leave, does not desert us, does not go away, never ends, endures forever, stays forever, doesn't go away. It is here. This is a standard Hebrew couplet in poetry. His steadfast love endures forever. Two ways of saying the exact same thing. His steadfast love endures forever. It never ends. God's love never ends, never fails, never goes away, never betrays, never lacks. God's love is always present, always real, always forgiving, always gracious, always loving. God's love is always with us. There is nothing we can do, not a thing we can say, not a thing we can do or believe. There is nothing that we can do that would cause God to stop loving us. You can say nothing, you can do nothing that would cause God to stop loving you. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what you've done. God's love is immutable. God's love never ends. God's love hangs fast. God's love is always there. Well, I thought you had to be good. I thought you had to behave rules and regulations. I thought that if you did bad things, God wouldn't love you. No. God commended His love toward us, and that while we were still sinning, while we were in the midst of sinning, Christ died for us. God's love never ends, never fails, never deserts us, never leaves us. We may turn our backs on God. God never turns God's back on us. God is always there with a word of grace and welcome and forgiveness. If only we, like those who've wandered into the desert in the psalm, or we who have been engaged in sin and become sick in our sin-sick souls, just like in the psalm, if we turn to God, God is there to forgive and to love and to heal, to touch and to transform. This is why we give thanks to God, because His steadfast love endures forever. It's one of those aspects of God's nature that is both transcendent and immanent. We talked about this in confirmation class today. God is both transcendent, beyond anything that we have and experience. You look up at the sky, you see the sky at night, and you go, wow, that's transcendence. And then you've got the relationships that we have with people right here and right now. That's immanence. The immanent nature of God, being right here. Well, His love is both transcendent and immanent. It's both beyond our ability to comprehend and imagine, and it is that which we can most readily receive and embrace and be embraced by. It's that which bridges the gap between transcendence and immanence. God's love endures forever. If you take nothing from this service today but this, I want you to take this proclamation. I thought it was interesting. The psalmist thought it was necessary for the congregation to say it too. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Verse 2. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His steadfast love endures forever. If you take nothing from this service, take that. His steadfast love endures forever. I want you to say that with me. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. God's steadfast love endures forever. Again, God's steadfast love endures forever. One more time. God's steadfast love endures forever. I don't know what you're facing today. I don't know what dark night of the soul you may be going through. I don't know what financial circumstances or disaster may be facing you. I don't know what exams you're looking at in school. I don't know what homework you're looking at that you haven't done yet. You got to get done before tomorrow morning. I don't know what it is in your family, your life, your work that's facing you today, this very moment. But no matter what it is, no matter what kind of desert you may be in, no matter how thirsty or hungry spiritually you may be, the good news is, say it with me, God's steadfast love endures forever. Hold on to that. That's why we give thanks. That is why we are called to give thanks and praise to God. That is why we're called to give thanks, to engage in acts of thanksgiving. That's why we're called to store up treasures in heaven. Not so we can have a good bank balance in heaven, no, because God's steadfast love endures forever. That's why we're called to be givers of ourselves, of our time, our talents, our gifts, our service, our witness. Because God's steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks and praise to God that His steadfast love endures forever, and there's nothing that we can do that will ever change that. Give thanks and praise to God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And may God's people sing.
In your presence, Lord, let me learn at your feet. I will take
been listening to a sermon by Dr. Gregory Neal, Senior Pastor of the First United Methodist Church in Commerce, Texas, and Rector of Grace Incarnate Ministries. Copyright 2017 by Dr. Gregory S. Neal, all rights reserved. For more information and for other sermons by Dr. Neal, visit us on the web at www.revneal.org. That's www.revneal.org. You are also invited to visit us in person at First United Methodist Church, 1709 Highway 24, Commerce, Texas, 75428. This program was produced by Dr. Greg Neal.